Behind, I'm Jim Gast, and this is my partner in crime, Dave Myers. Dave, how you doing today?
I'm good. How about you?
Yeah. You know what? Got a little bit of a kind of a sunny day behind me, so I'm kind of happy about that. We're going to get up to 60 degrees. Woo, it's a heat wave, right? So
It's
here in
great. I'll take it in mid-February.
yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Well, listen, Dave, I'm excited about today's show. Very important topic, kind of a continuation of what we talked about a couple weeks ago, right? And that was data risk management and compliance and, things of that nature, the importance of things hidden in contracts. So, we talked about, I think it's a really good idea to kind of talk about the parties involved in a risk management strategy and the roles because you can't really negotiate and navigate that contract unless we get these people involved. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, one of the things that I see a lot is there's a lot of confusion in who the business owner or the business manager should be talking to about this topic of security risk. And what happens is you've got people from multiple different practice areas, multiple different industries that are all talking about this supposedly same concern.
Yeah.
And it creates a lot of confusion on the part of the business owner, whoever's responsible for managing this risk at a company. And so what I thought would make a lot of sense today would be to address this concept that you have to listen to one or the other, when the reality is you have to pay attention to all the various skill sets that these different parties are bringing to the table and how we can sort of integrate them together.
Yeah, and there's a lot of disciplines involved in a risk management strategy. That's tongue tied there for a moment. And
Yeah.
so let's talk about people. Let's talk about from a broad category of people that would be involved. What are some of those parties initially?
So let's start with an analogy that I like to make. Okay.
I like analogies.
A lot of people are not as familiar with cybersecurity as they are with their own healthcare. Okay. But we all know when it comes to healthcare that we don't just work with one person. You've got general practitioners who you'll use for routine maintenance, regular check-ins, evaluations to make sure nothing seems out of the ordinary. You've got various specialists who, if you've got a certain condition or a certain risk factor, you'll work with a certain specialist in conjunction with that GP for that specific item.
Mm-hmm.
You also have nursing, you have other healthcare folks that do certain tasks for you. Then you have groups like your pharmacist, who is very specifically there for medication management and interaction and whatnot. You've got health insurance. You've got all these different parties involved. And we just from the everyday person, we've all dealt with managing our healthcare, and we've seen these different groups, these different parties interact. And we say, hey, if you're not working together and you're not all seeing the big picture, my healthcare is not where it needs to be.
Right.
I like to use that and bring it over to the world of cybersecurity and point out that we have the same dynamic involved. You've got a number of different parties that are involved when it comes to cyber. Everybody thinks of their IT department, just like everybody thinks of their general practitioner. But you need to look beyond just the information technology group, because you need to understand what your responsibilities even are,
Mm-hmm.
what your costs are going to be if you fail to live up to them. And so that's where you start to get these other groups involved. So let's sort of talk about what the common ones are, okay?
Yep.
These are key. You've got to have somebody managing information technology. Let's not take anything away from that, because your information technology group plays a central role in this, which we'll talk about here in just a second. You also need to involve legal. You also need to involve, some would say, accounting. That really is more of a financial purpose. We also, many times, will have somebody dedicated to risk management. Now, whether that's internal or external can be different from company to company. Sometimes you'll have somebody internal doing risk management. Sometimes you'll outsource that process either to a consulting firm or some other group.
I'm going to get it out there, Dave. A lawyer
Yeah.
like yourself. A lawyer like yourself.
Yeah, that absolutely. I engage in risk management discussions all the time with people.
Now, that doesn't mean you're supplanting any one of these people.
And that's the important thing. That's the important thing. And that's really what I want to focus on here today.
Mm-hmm.
In certain situations, you might have managed security service providers if you have specific needs. And I'll let you sort of discuss the difference between an MSP and an MSSP. All right.
Sure.
And why you would need both. Human relations, public relations, insurance, all these different parties are critical to have a comprehensive security plan in place. So I know I just talked about a bunch of different roles. I can start wherever
Well,
you find the most interesting.
I wanted to back up for a second, go back to your analogy, okay? Because I'm living that analogy right now. So there's a prescription that I need. It's an expensive prescription. By the way, don't worry, I'm not terminal or anything like that. But it's an expensive prescription, and I was getting it last year. Guess what? Changed insurance companies this year, health insurance companies this year. The doctor called in the prescription. The pharmacy, I went to the pharmacy, said, come get it. Went to the pharmacy. Insurance company said no. Went back to the doctor. Doctor said, well, I'll put it in again or whatever, or whatever needs to be done. Went back to the pharmacy. No. They said, the insurance company said no. I had to get a hold of the insurance company to make them work with, and I'm still going through that process. But this is a prime example of me sitting in this role, having to quarterback all of these parties and get them all to work together. It's a nightmare, right?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, if the parties don't communicate with each other, you're the one that's going to suffer.
Yeah, you got it.
Not them.
You got it.
There might be some ill will. You might not be happy with the pharmacy or the insurance company or the doctor, depending on who you feel is not doing a job communicating. But at the end of the day, you're the one that's not getting the care that you need. And the same thing happens on the cybersecurity side of things.
Yeah, very much so. So let's start, Dave. I really think it's important to look at these individual groups and let's pick out their roles and their interactions also. Okay.
Yeah.
And so let's go first. Technology people, on-site staff, on how in-house staff, outsourced. Let's talk about the technology.
So this is what immediately pops to people's minds when they think about their computer security needs. Okay, they immediately think of the IT department, internal or external, and it's because this is your first line defense, sort of table stakes stuff that you need to have. We're talking about things like needing security devices that block malicious traffic. We're talking about having the computers with their antivirus systems or their endpoint detection systems. Or let's not get in the weeds on the tech stuff. But the thing is that we've got these core things that need to be in place. We need to make sure machines are up to date. We need to make sure, that we're monitoring, potentially holes that might exist in the network and so on and so forth. And this is all generally a function of information technology. So without IT, you've got no security because they're the ones that are, actually there in the trenches, making sure that the protections are in place.
Yep.
And that's what everybody thinks of with good reason.
Yeah.
So that's IT, but they don't operate in a vacuum because where do they get their guidance from?
Yeah. And so their interactions, hey, my thought is this. I'm a business owner. By the way, SpliceNet, we're an MSP. We run and outsource IT for lots of companies and co-manage IT for lots of companies.
Mhm.
If a customer of ours was to come to me and say, "Hey, we've got a vendor audit," or "Hey, we need to do a vendor audit because somebody is telling us to," or we're getting audited by one of our customers and they're asking us about this stuff. Sure, I mean, we could look at it, right,
Right.
and answer those questions. But I'm happy to give feedback, but I always strongly recommend getting other parties involved. What I like to see, and again, this is we're actually talking to general counsel and business attorneys here today. That's our audience today, right?
Right.
What do we do? What do I do? Okay, what I would do as a business owner is not. I'd tell that business owner, you shouldn't come to me first. You should go to your corporate counsel, your outsourced corporate counsel, and or in-house counsel, and they should then talk to a data risk person like yourself. That's what I would recommend from an IT perspective. So, the technology people aren't the answer. I can say, check, yeah, you got two-factor authentication, but that's not really what we're looking for, is it here?
No, it's not. And here's the thing. There is a huge difference between do I have a control or do I not have a control
Mm-hmm.
versus do I have the right controls and do I have enough controls? Okay. So this is one of the things that cybersecurity is almost always on sort of a sliding scale approach to things. And this is why risk management is the name of the game. We know that there's no single set of rules that absolutely will keep you safe from all liability. We also know that there's no set of protections that are going to 100% keep you safe from suffering a cyber incident. And so we're always struggling with this idea that we've got a finite amount of resources to address an infinite amount of potential risk
Mm-hmm.
because we've always got new risk coming out. We've always, whether that risk be technical risks because there's new technical threats out there, whether it's a risk because of some new legislation that could potentially be, used to levy fines or some other lawsuits on a company. And so we're trying to allocate these scarce resources. And so while we absolutely need to look at does a particular control exist? Do we have multi-factor? Yes or no? That's a question that is about whether or not it's there. But
Yep.
is it enough? And it's that is it enough question where having somebody that not having somebody, but having a team that works together is necessary. So you need somebody involved in risk management that says, okay, here's here's the obligations. This is what you're supposed to be doing. Here's what you're doing. Here's what it would take to get from here to here.
Yeah.
Here's the risk if you don't. Let's evaluate whether or not it makes sense to get from here to here. Okay.
Yep.
But you can't even get to this analysis without all these people involved. So let's go back to your example of this particular audit scenario
Yeah.
and your multi-factor authentications example. When I get brought in, if somebody goes, hey, we want to know what our risks are from a cybersecurity posture, I go, okay, that's cool. Well, let's start by what data do you have? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Pretty common. Well, I'm not going to magically know that answer.
Yep.
I need to work with other people, whether that be in their in-house IT, whether it be some other group. You might have a document, management department or something like that. They are the ones who will help you identify what do you have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, now you have this. Now the ball gets volleyed back to my side of the court. And it's like, okay, because of that, you're subject to X, Y, and Z. And according to X, Y, and Z, you're supposed to have this list of controls. All right. Do I have them? Well, again, I don't know.
Yeah.
I need to go and I need to talk to your specialists who manage the implementation and maintenance of those controls. That's when I come back to somebody like the managed service provider or in-house information technology, and I go, hey, because of X, Y, and Z, we need to have these controls. This is what they're saying we should have. What do we actually have? And then I have to rely on getting the correct explanations from those technical experts to tell me where we stand. And this might come as a surprise to nobody, but very rarely does somebody come back and say, oh, we've got all those things.
Yeah.
There's almost always some insufficiency or deficiency, or however you would say it. There's always something that's not exactly where the law says it needs to be, whether that law comes from a statute or the courts or a contract, which is what we talked about last week or last show I was on. And so then we go, all right, we're not there yet. What would it take to get from point A to point B?
Right.
And that's a discussion. That's a discussion where I can't know that answer by myself.
Yeah. And that's where the IT group's going to come in. You're going to have a lot of ideas and thoughts on it, of course, because you've been down this road a lot of times. But tell me about the role of senior management. Are they, or leadership, if you will?
At the end of the day, if you don't have genuine buy-in from a culture, if you don't have the business culture of security, if senior management doesn't make that a value, you will consistently have an underinvestment in those protections. So you could have the best data privacy lawyers, best data privacy consultants, best data privacy implementers in the world on your Rolodex. But if you don't have senior management's buy-in and control of the purse strings to make the necessary investment required, then they're just names on a Rolodex. You're not going to get any improvement. And that's where businesses get into trouble, because they identify a need and then they don't do anything about it. They don't even make that effort. Yeah. And it's that head in the sand approach, or that pretending like this is not a necessary thing to address. That's what's getting companies into trouble. It's not when people are making concerted efforts and something just still happens to go wrong. Yeah, I mean, we don't want to see that ever, but those are not the people that, they're not the ones that keep me up at night.
Yeah. So what we have seen in the past, and you and I have both been down this road plenty of times, is when a customer audit comes to the table, businesses are motivated. We don't want to lose customers.
It's almost always a business audit, or it's time they'd finally decide, oh, maybe we should get some of this cyber insurance, or it's time to renew the cyber insurance.
Or regulatory too. Don't forget, regulatory is.
And sometimes that's it. Yeah, there are certain instances where that happens. Don't get me wrong. But from what I see, most of the time, it's either you've received an audit from a client who's subject to the regulations. So let's kind of back up just a second here. And this is something I talk about a lot, but it bears repeating here for the purposes of what we're talking about. I work with a lot of mid-market companies, anywhere. My clients might have anywhere from 10 to 500 employees. And, they are probably, frequently they're underneath whatever threshold would apply, for a regulation. They're not quote unquote big enough for that law, for that regulation to apply to them. And so when I say that the regulations aren't necessarily driving their decisions, it's because it doesn't directly drive. Yeah. But a lot of times my clients will be working for big companies who are subject to those regulations.
Trickle down.
And those get pushed downstream via contractual arrangements, which is why this is our follow-on.
Yeah.
And the idea is that you'll have that regulation. The client will have an obligation. They'll put obligations on you. And therefore, now you've got all these contractual things that you've agreed. I've got X, Y, and Z in place. Okay.
Written information security policy.
Exactly. And so then the question is, based on what my insurance company wants to see and what I'm going to tell them, because the worst thing you could do is lie
Yep.
on your insurance application and say you have things when you don't, whether it's part of a customer audit because you don't want to lie and tell a customer that you have something when you don't,
Yep.
or when you're signing a contract at the onset saying you have something when you don't. So this is where the is it enough comes into play again. You get this language, whether it comes from one of those three sources, whether it comes from insurance or the customer, whether, and I said three, customer in the context of an audit or a contract. They ask a question, and sometimes it's clear. Do you have multi-factor authentication? That's an easy one.
Yeah, but it's really not.
Yes or no.
It depends, really.
It depends on how many different systems they have.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on whether or not those systems are applicable to the situation. So let's take a contract, for example. Somebody comes to you with a contract, that's putting certain obligations on you. If the company that's looking at the contract or the general counsel that's looking at the contract goes, oh, they want to know if we have multi-factor. Yeah, we have multi-factor. Or even different. No, we have multi-factor in certain places. Oh, no, I guess we can't say yes. We don't, we have to say we don't have it everywhere.
Yeah.
That's fine. You're technically correct. But have you addressed are you doing enough? No, you haven't addressed whether you're doing enough.
Yeah.
Sometimes you could turn around and say, hey, we don't have multi-factor everywhere. However, all the places where your data is going to live is protected by a login that has multi-factor.
Yeah.
And so you could go back to that customer that put that contract in front of you, and you could say, we're going to modify this language because it's protecting what you really care about. We've done enough, but we're not going to lie and say we have it everywhere when we don't.
So you're taking the vague and getting specific.
Exactly. We tailor it based on the reality. And in some cases, I will tell you, some cases, another party is going to ask you, do you have something? And you just don't have it.
Yeah.
What do you do then? Do you lose the customer? Do you not get the contract? Insurance is a little different. A lot of times they'll just simply say, you either get it or we're not going to bind coverage. But a lot of times you can go back to the customer and say, I know you want me to have this. I don't have this. Is that okay? And if you just go with that approach,
the question,
a lot of times it's going to not be okay.
Yeah. At least
But
you know.
if you have somebody that
gray area.
But if you've got the right people involved and you can go back to that customer and say, hey, we don't have this, but we're still going to protect your stuff this other way in the interim. We also have a plan to have this within a certain period of time. And I've already got the appropriate parties, whether it be, information technology, usually information technology has already come in and said, all right, yeah, here's the implementation plan. Here's how much, here's how long it's going to take. And here's when you'll have it.
Yeah.
Not always, but a lot of the times, most of the times in my experience, the other party will be like, that's enough. That's good enough. Now you better do what you say you're going to do. But that's a different discussion for that's just like anything. If you say you're going to do something, do it. But the point is that if you're just general counsel and you're getting these questions, you got to be careful that you don't overstate, but you also have to understand that you can push back in certain instances.
Yeah.
If you're in IT, you need to not just answer questions objectively. You need to have all these parties involved to come up with the right answer and the right approach to respond. If your answer isn't 100% conclusively, yeah, we're good. And rarely are we ever 100% we're good.
Yeah, I think another good analogy, Dave, is a doctor dealing with a general physician dealing with a very sophisticated type of ailment, right? That general physician, albeit that person's information is very important, they need to turn to people that have expertise in this area, this area, this area, and this area. That's your IT people. That's you as a risk management attorney, and that general practitioner, that business attorney, if you will, to kind of take the analogy back over to here.
Yeah.
Okay. Is understanding, okay, look, I've got a role to do. I need to pull these people together, right? I need to coordinate the meetings. They're not cut out of this process at all.
Not at all. I mean,
to this process.
No, in fact, a lot of times they are not necessarily quarterbacking the solution. That can vary from situation to situation. But the other thing is that take someone like me, for example. All right. If a client comes to me and says, we've got this contract that needs to be negotiated for these provisions, et cetera, et cetera. And then general counsel said, oh, by the way, can you also look at these tax provisions too? No.
That's right.
No, thank you.
I
only if you want to like totally be in breach of your contract, sure.
Yeah.
But that general counsel has that responsibility for managing that holistic well-being of the body, which is the client.
Yep.
So that's the GP. The GP doesn't get to wash their hands. The GP doesn't get to, say, oh, well, I referred him to cardiology, and so I don't even care what happens over there. No,
Nope.
It is, that GP, just like our general counsel, our GC, who is ultimately responsible for the overall legal health of that company, which goes way beyond just the cybersecurity space. And so they're never cut out. In fact, they ultimately are the primary benefactor of the work that data privacy person is bringing to the table.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot more responsibility after because big.
Let me give you an example. I obviously I've got, I have some medications that I'm on, and I had some health issues back in 2018 out of the blue, genetic issues that I hadn't expected. And I had to see a bunch of specialists to try and figure out what in the world was actually wrong with me.
Yeah.
That's great. We figured it out. And then I'm on certain medications. I don't see those specialists, except maybe once in a while. But my GP, my general practitioner, is the one who's responsible for managing the information that they've gotten from the specialist and putting it into my overall care plan.
You got it.
Same way with your general counsel. I'm not going to get every question. That general counsel is going to get educated on that particular client's situation, and then they're going to take over that. As long as the ship is kind of running steady, I'm going to steer the ship.
And that may mean pulling the IT people back to the table. That may mean pulling the risk management individual
Exactly. Exactly. When a new regulation comes out, well, maybe we need to bring David back in. But as long as we don't, I know that David has come up with this prioritized list. I can manage this list and keep IT involved, and we can work together. I don't even need David all the time.
Yeah.
But it's about bringing in the right parties when necessary.
You bet.
That's what's key.
Well, Dave, you know what? We're almost out of time. Let's sum this up. Okay.
Yeah.
Sum it up in short order. I'm a general counsel of a business that just got a customer audit. Sum it up, in 2 minutes. What needs to happen? Just generally.
So, your general counsel, you got to question a vendor audit. First things first. You need to get the IT group involved from the outset. And I think most general counsel says, well, I knew that. But then you need to identify all those areas that are potentially gray, potentially areas where we don't obviously meet the rules or the requirements that are being put in front of us, or we don't think we need to meet these rules. So either we don't and we know that we probably should, or we don't and we don't think we need to. You need to identify those questions, and you need to get with somebody who regularly works with these specific issues. That could be someone like myself. There are several attorneys in Ohio who, this is what we do. There are certain other risk management professionals that are out there who can look at it and say, okay, you don't have this, you're being asked for this. In the event that you don't do it, here's your financial exposure. So a lot of times you'll involve consulting groups and CPAs. So, You need to look at what you don't know the answers to, and then bring in the people to try and figure out how do we either plug that hole or respond to that issue.
You got it. You got it.
Don't
Dave.
just do it off the cuff. That's what I would say.
If it would be like a doctor determining from an office visit at your general practice, oh, you have cancer,
Yep.
and I mean, make it that severe, but
no, but when that doctor feels that spot and feels that lump and goes, this is not normal.
That's what it
You
should
need to get somebody involved.
We should pull back and say, let's get other people involved, make this
right.
Dave,
So those areas that aren't clear, if you get that, something's off here, that's where you bring in the others.
Yep, I think this was pretty clear today. Again, if you're a general counsel, business attorney, you will probably encounter this at one point.
They're happening more and more frequently. This is not going to become any less.
It's become an industry for a reason. I would caution you on moving forward too far without additional consultation of other professionals. And I hope this.
Well, let me just make one last point, because what you just said is so important. Don't just choose a direction and a goal just because you think that it's what you need, because it's the new shiny object, or because it's supposedly the holy grail of security.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You got to understand what your goals are and what your requirements are before you chart a path to improve. So I'm not going to say don't get better. I'm saying don't do things just for the sake of doing them, because you might be spending money on something that doesn't really matter for you.
You bet. All right, Dave, thanks a lot. Great show.
Thank you.
Everyone, again, this is No Law Firm Left Behind. You can find us on LinkedIn. We've got a group on LinkedIn, so go search for No Law Firm Left Behind and join the group. There's also a page that you can follow. Sorry for the ugly URL. And then if you're looking for all of our other podcasts and links to the show, you can go to this link right here, splice.net/No Law Firm Left Behind. Dave, I appreciate you joining, and rest of your week.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.